The internet is like a window. It allows us to see into the lives of many. Some people keep their life private online, and others allow it to be shown for the entire world to see. Some people are living completely normal and functional lives, and others are, well, that speaks for itself. But if it wasn't for the internet, you would probably have no idea any of these people even existed, and that's for better or for worse. But due to this, many people of many shapes and sizes have documented basically their entire lives online, and we get to see just how some live those lives. Now, of course, if we were just talking about a regular person, we wouldn't be here today. Who wants to talk about some guy who goes to his regular 9-to-5 job every day, stuck in an endless loop?
Coming to bed, honey?
Yes, dear.
That's not interesting, that's too realistic, and you come to YouTube to get away from that. Instead, what we're talking about today is one of the strangest people I have ever seen on the internet, and it's a challenge even saying his name. This is Ulillillia. Real name, Nick Smith. Ulil is a man who loves video games, really loves video games, and has had video games integrated into every aspect of his life. He was discovered very early on in the early 2000s, and has since had a ton of aspects of his life documented. Some praised him, some ridiculed him, and some just thought he was an interesting person, and I'm in the last group. Join me today as we dive into the story of Ulillillia.
What could possibly go wrong?
I'm doing something a bit different with this video. My previous story of videos have been on people who were very detestable. They were usually seen in a negative light, but I think I like to be a bit more positive than the average YouTuber who makes these types of videos, because I can see the potential and glimmer of hope in some of these guys. Ulillillia is not going to be like those others. He's very strange, but he's not unlikable or detestable. Quite the opposite, really. Sorry for the clickbait. I might crack a few jokes here and there, but the main point of this vid is to show you this guy's quirks and really pick at his brain and why he is the way he is. Ulil is not just a neurodivergent, he is the neurodivergent. We'll see why that is. Nick Smith was born on January 10th, 1984, in North Dakota, and, well, despite how much of a spectacle he will become later in life, we surprisingly know very little about his adolescence, so I'm going to make my own fanfiction. I'm going to imagine Nick was born, and as he got older, his family started noticing all of his abnormal sensibilities and quirks. There was probably something going on upstairs that they didn't know about, and it was the 80s, so the studies on someone like Nick probably wouldn't explain much of anything. I should go ahead and mention this because it's very important. With it being the cornerstone of my channel and being mentioned almost every damn video, Ulillillia is not diagnosed with autism. He has never been officially diagnosed with it, which is actually surprising. What he is confirmed to have is he has a very severe case of obsessive-compulsive disorder, which makes him have all sorts of phobias and fears, and a ton of obsessions, which we'll get into later. His case of OCD is to the point where it majorly affects his daily life and ability to function in social situations. Basically, with his condition and needs, he's probably not going to have a functional normal life, which may be a blessing and a curse. While he may not shine in the normie world, where he did shine was the realm of video games. Nick is a huge gamer. He always has been. He was born in '84, the ripe time to become a gamer. It has been a part of his identity and always will be. But the thing is, Nick is also the most dedicated gamer I have ever seen, with not a hint of exaggeration. I thought speedrunners playing the same games over and over and over was some dedication. But Nick puts them to shame. Nick has claimed he has put hundreds of thousands of hours in games you would not expect. Games that only have, arguably, a handful of hours of gameplay in them. He has somehow pulled off the most tedious, mind-numbing tasks possible no normal man would ever attempt in a game. Listen to some of his feats.
Super Mario 3. Oh, how I remember this one so much. I've actually literally gotten a max score on the very first level in the game. This one I have about 1,500 hours on. Seriously, 1,500 hours. And there you have it. I've maxed the score and I'm only 8 minutes in. Amazing! The levels are really big, so there's a lot of places I can figure out that two-tailed fox named Tails that I just love abusing so much. Toss them in the water. Create debug created courses of bumpers and Carnival Night 2. Just ding 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 ding, like that. And wait for them to drown. Get a new fox and go from there.
You know, role-playing games and the concept of grinding. You know when you have to kill a ton of things to get your level up in a game, the most tedious part of any RPG that everyone hates? Well, Nick spits in your face and shows you how it's done.
Only a few more plays remain, and then I finally have level 9999 for the very first time in this game. Yep, the 9s.
The strangest one of all is, Nick has a massive obsession with a furry mascot character with attitude from the 90s that is strong with the Neurodipurrgent community. That's right, Bubsy the Bobcat. He's probably the world's biggest Bubsy fan.
3,600. That is a lot of play, and it's all because of two main things. Glide hops and speed like you would never believe. You can just go so fast on this game, it just blows your mind away.
He has scoured every single inch and centimeter of every one of his games. He has videos up showing secrets about Bubsy 3D probably nobody else knows about.
Just go forward until you see the shadow. Once you see the shadow, stop moving forward. Welcome to the highest possible point you can stand on in the entire game.
He has numerous videos on Bubsy 3D. He probably has more hours in this game than the entire base of people who bought Bubsy 3D, collectively.
I know this game extremely well.
He'll just thoroughly dissect every single part of it, every single mechanic, everything about it. You know how there are those obscure video game glitches that make you wonder, how did they ever find this out? People like Nick, and pure dedication to the craft. To also add on to this dedication to video games, Nick is also a mathematic genius. He has tons of math equations and all sorts of hypotheticals and such he's written just for the hell of it. He created his own color system he followed using mathematics. He created his own sleep schedule using his math skills so he could follow it in his own way.
Instead of following a 24-hour cycle like most of us are otherwise familiar with, I follow a 25 2/3 hour cycle. There's 24 hours in a day, and my sleep-wake cycle is 25 2/3. The difference? 1 2/3 hours.
The man is clearly talented in more ways than one. He would apply his love for video games and mathematics to his everyday life, equating any sort of skill or practice in something and turning them into experience, like in an RPG. Now, yes, it does seem a little strange and maybe a bit cringe to do some "my life is like a video game" type of shit here, and I thought the same thing too at first. But reading on this dude and all he's accomplished, you can't help but be charmed by the guy, and we'll get into why throughout this video. So Nick is driven by pure love and dedication to video games and math. He's willing to go to such lengths to basically tear them apart and apply mathematical equations and such to them, and it's for games that aren't even that good. But just so you know, this obsession and passion for video games Nick has is not entirely positive. In fact, it also affected Nick in a very negative way that not many people would even think about.
Did I mention I don't like heights?
In the vast majority of video games, you're usually dodging obstacles. You know, enemies, pits, spikes, whatever gets in your way counts as an obstacle. But what makes gaming so fun is that they're easy to spot, and you usually know what is the danger to be avoided in a game. But video games are fictitious. Most of what happens in the games stay in the games. Nobody tries to apply anything we learned in Bing Bing Wahoo to real life. Our boy Nick played video games so much, as he grew up, he gained phobias over various different things in real life that he learned to avoid in games, as he thought they would harm him in the real world. He has a laundry list of strange phobias and fears, and we're going to go over some of them right now. One of the most troubling of his phobias was his fear of blue water. He had played many games where water automatically killed you, and growing up, he thought it was the same thing in real life. So anywhere with any kind of water, he would attempt to avoid. But you know, water is kind of impossible to avoid. Blue water is hard to come by, but essentially he got over this fear due to the fact that water is just water. The same thing also happened with grass, as he equivalated grass with video game spikes. He thought if he fell on grass, it would kill him. This phobia was also never going to last because, well, you can't avoid grass. Another one of his phobias was stairs. It's not that he's afraid to go up the stairs, but he will only go up them in a very specific way. He states he has no clue how this even came about, or even how this phobia started, but he can only go up them like this, and this looks like an absolute pain of a phobia to have. I wonder how he would handle those rocky steps. And then there was his fear of mirrors. Oh boy, this one is crazy. Nick had an awful fear of mirrors. He would go out of his way to avoid ever looking into one, dreading what would happen. He had such a crippling fear of mirrors, he even mapped out this theoretical department store and all the ways all these mirrors could be facing, and then planned an entire route so he would never have to face or look at a mirror in the process. And he goes into excruciating detail about what he would do to ever avoid coming across a mirror in the department store, treating it again like a video game. He had a fear of ketchup and mustard because they reminded him of a video game lava. He had a fear of the letter P. I think we just found his true identity. Now yes, all these phobias are very strange and unconventional, but look, the definition of a phobia is an irrational and unrealistic fear of something, and these fit that definition perfectly. But yeah, too long didn't read. It's a bunch of really weird and really irrational fears. Exactly what I said. But the thing you must understand is, today, we live in a world where people will demand the entire world stop for them and just them. Everyone has to stop everything they're doing and cater to them. But Nick was different. He never asked anyone to take down anything or get rid of anything because he hated it. He just stood there and took it, and found out his own way around these phobias.
And there's also concerts going on over there. I otherwise never really go to those because of one thing. Noise. And that's high. It's really loud.
Some of these phobias he never got over, at least to my knowledge. His parents even considered sending him to a hypnotist to fix some of these phobias, but he went against it last minute.
I wanted to hypnotize Nicky to get him out of the mirror situation and the stare situation. I thought, oh, if I hypnotize him. So I went to a hypnotist and I asked him, and she said, sure, we can do that. The patient has to be willing to do it. And at that time, Nicky was. And now he won't do it. He lost interest.
His family has really tried to work with Nick's lifestyle all these years. They're supportive and tried their best to accommodate him, like his eating choices, which one of his favorite meals is degreased pizza, where he heats up a pizza and goes through the painstaking process of taking all the grease off with a paper towel.
Carbohydrates are 4 and protein are 4. But look how much this all comes up. This is a lot of grease. This is why I degrease, and this is why I'm actually otherwise at a pretty healthy weight overall, despite the fact I eat almost nothing but pizza.
Wow, he's even dissecting his food! Because of his quirks and his strange phobias, it was very difficult for Nick to really connect and get any friends, because nobody really understood him but him.
They would just be mean to me, say mean things. They would... Well, there's one case where one of them literally spit on my back. Seriously. They often whistle for no reason, really getting me irritated. You know, it's an easy way to trigger a fight with me is whistling, so I better be careful with that.
No hope of getting a significant other either, which he has also expressed, but you know, it is what it is.
So you have no romantic interests?
Nope, I have zero interest in that kind of stuff.
Why is that?
A lot of things. There's so many negatives on top of one another, on top of another.
Like what?
There's 4-digit negative for just getting married, in a sense. It's so far into negative territory that it almost rivals robbing banks.
Nick has no friends, nobody to connect with, and also lives in one of the US's least populated states. Finding anyone who he can relate with is pretty much impossible. While in real life he was a weird loner, on the internet he thrived, and this would lead people on the web discovering the story of Ulillillia.
Hey, whatever blows your hair back.
So Nick, in the early 2000s, will discover a way to get his frustrations out and document his life. And using the power of Angel Fire, he created his own website, Ulillillia. Most of the info in this video came from his very own website, as Nick himself did almost all the documentation of himself. He wears his heart on his sleeve, which gives him an extra 500 max HP. On this website, he documents everything. His life, his interest, his fears, what he does for fun, his likes and dislikes. He put it all out there for the world to see. One thing I neglected to mention is on this website, Nick also documents almost every dream he has. he uses the website as a dream journal of sorts, and having the mind Nick does, he has some weird fucking dreams. Dreams involving video games, dreams where he travels to far off places, dreams where he's covered in mud. It's a trip reading through all the ones he's recorded. But he just doesn't record them. He also reviews and ranks them, categorizes them using mathematic formulas. He went above and beyond for this stuff. Meanwhile, if I were to record my dreams, I'd just put down in a text file, Mario if he real. Going through the archives of this angel-fired site from the early 2000s is not only nostalgic as hell, but also actually interesting. Even though I'm too grug-brained to understand the mathematic formulas, everything else is a sight for the eyes. Back in the early 2000s, when the internet was still really niche, still being on dial-up and all, there wasn't any one place really following certain individuals like there are now. Well, except for one place. Something Awful. Something Awful being probably the first congregation of internet dwellers looking at weird people and weird things online, someone had happened across Nick's website, and was so perplexed by it, they had to share it with the rest of the site. It was originally meant to just clown on the guy and posted it to the Comedy Goldmine part of the forums. When they shared the website, the people over on Something Awful were polarized. Some were amazed, some were impressed, some were disgusted, and some thought it was a joke. But all of them were definitely intrigued. They had just discovered an absolute oddity, and they weren't going to let him go. In fact, they decided to actively start following him and his endeavors. Now, if you think this is the part where they start screwing with Nick and making his life a living hell, you'd be surprisingly wrong. In fact, the opposite happened. Nick was such a weird and interesting guy, he became somewhat of a little micro-celebrity on Something Awful. Some flat out became obsessed with the guy and desperately tried to get an interview with him or find some way to talk to him, but the mods had to put their foot down on the people obsessing over him. He was definitely one of the earliest internet celebrities, at least on Something Awful. With this exposure on Something Awful, word of Nick's antics spread to what was the internet at the time, and he quickly gained a cult audience who were now following his website. I don't think he really had a grasp on the idea that potentially dozens and dozens of people were now reading his stories and progress throughout life. But from everything I've seen, he just continued business as usual, updating the website constantly with more stories, progress on life, and other things. So yeah, he's congregated sort of a fan base following him. A lot more impressed and were actually charmed by his motivations and how he got around in his daily life. Then, YouTube came out, and so Nick started using YouTube to record and document his life on there. Although he's since deleted the channel, of course people have archived the videos. His life, his phobias, his dreams, and his math skills are interesting to read about, but does he have anything he wants to do with these skills? Anything he'd like to apply them to help him in the future? Why yes. Yes he does.
Hey, I didn't like this stuff.
If you ask me, the most interesting part about everything involving Ulillillia is what he calls his mind game. You see, Nick has played so many video games and spent so much time in them, he has ascended to a new level of video gaming. He has developed his very own video game inside of his mind. Whenever he's bored and not doing anything in particular, he will enter a trance and start playing this video game inside of his head. What does he do inside this so-called mind game? In this mind game, he has superhuman abilities that allow him to do whatever he wants in his mind. Climbing mountains in literal minutes, running at supersonic speeds. And in this mind game, he is completely immune to pain and damage, so he can do basically whatever he wants. And the only person who can stop Nick in this game is Nick himself. In his mind, the chains are taken off, and Nick is free. This is a very, very difficult thing to try and express to people what you do in your free time. If you told people you stare off into space to play this video game you've created inside your head, they would look at you like you're fucking insane. And admittedly, it is a very loaded thing to drop on someone, and Nick knows this. So after years of playing this mind game and trancing in and out of the real world, Nick decided he had to find a way to show everyone the vast amount of creativity and his skills in mathematics, and wanted to give people a way to experience the things he enjoyed, so he got on his computer and started to develop his very own game, called Platform Masters. After graduating high school, Nick would dedicate a lot of his time developing this game. He had no real coding or game development knowledge, nor any artistic skills, but he basically brute forced all of that with his knowledge of mathematics. He would post constant updates and developments of his game over the years, because, well, this was a collection of all the knowledge and skills he had built up over the years, And for a game made by one guy, who had never developed a game before and never really had any connection to the outside world, it's technically impressive.
I also didn't just individualize them, I also made them bigger. And if you look closely, I've also made an enhancement on the lighting. Whoa, all these crazy platforms over here. That one stops, and up I go to the next section. Gotta love platforming, you know.
Nick would dump a ton of time into the development of this game, but that's not to say he didn't do other things, as Nick has also gone out of his way to write books. Yeah, a lot of people I've talked about seem to love and enjoy writing novels, and I'd rather not talk about some of them.
Buy my book!
Nick's most famous novel is called The Legend of the 10 Elemental Masters. Look at that cover art. Oh my god, I unironically love it. The early CGI look, it has a very nice vibe to it. I went out of my way to read this. In fact, to show you I mean business, I actually went out and bought a hard copy of this. I wanted to tell you all Nick's story and also support him at the same time. And having read through the book, well, I did some speed reading, and I'll just say, this is only made for a very specific group of people. And, well, I really hope you like numbers. The entire book is formatted like an old school RPG, and its plot is also as basic as an old school RPG. The main character is this weird purple furry named Knuckles. Not the Knuckles you're thinking of, but he's described as resembling a human, but with differences. Knuckles is neither male nor female, though referred to as a he. 3/4 inch thick dark violet colored fur covers his entire body. He's only 25 1/3 inches tall, 4 inches wide, and 2.5 inches deep. Knuckles gets his name from his large hands, 40% bigger than a human his size would have. No, we never get any picture of what Knuckles looks like in the book, so here's an artist's rendition. You know, I get the feeling that yaoi artists would really enjoy this character. Now, if you couldn't tell, that description of Knuckles is hyper specific. From his exact size, to how thick his fur is, from how big his fists are. Now take that and imagine an entire book like that. This entire book is hyper detailed about all the numbers and the experience gained. Like reading through this, it's clear that the actual plot or anything happening takes a back seat to the number crunching and all the RPG mechanics involved within. It even has some menus on some pages like the status screens in an RPG. I don't think there is a single page in this book that does not have at least one number on it. Plot-wise, it's really easy to follow. It's a very bare-bones plot, but Nick wasn't writing this for the plot. Nick made this book for himself, basically, and there's nothing wrong with that, but don't buy this expecting something made for everyone. I bought this to support Nick. I didn't want anyone to get the wrong idea that I'm trying to pick on him. He's a strange man, very strange indeed, and I've made some quips here and there, but after all the research I've done on him for this video, he has a lot of issues. But he's overcome all the odds and has found a way to be productive. He'll go on to make more games and write more books. They're all about what you would expect from him.
Barricana, my 2D side-scrolling platformer role-playing game hybrid, has undergone significant change since the last update. I've actually finished every single background, except for shops and a couple other maybe side story-related stuff, but that's about it.
He's been known on the web for more than 20 years, and from the looks of things, today, not much has changed.
Well, are you still playing this thing?
Enough eyes would get on Nick, to the point where eventually, someone decided to do a documentary on him. An actual documentary, with a production crew, and not just some guy with editing software, like yours truly. However, during the production of said documentary, Nick's hometown was flooded, and it was pretty devastating on the community. So because of this incident, it's sort of half a documentary on Nick, and the other half is talking to the members of the community and how the flood affected them. It's kind of weirdly formatted, but other than that, it's alright. Strange enough though, this documentary was completed in 2012, but it did not see the light of day until about 7 years later, and no one knows why. It is what it is. The documentary goes over pretty much everything I've said in this video. Nick's life, Nick's aspirations, his family, and also how the flood affected him. Now don't get the idea you can use these videos for replacement. I highly recommend you go check the original video out yourself. It says way more than I can. But remember, this was made back in 2012. That was 12 years ago. What about today? What is going on with Nick these days? Well, his original website is now no longer up. The domain is completely dead, but archives of it still exist and have been a big help for this video. He's also deleted a lot of the videos he uploaded to YouTube. I guess maybe the fame was a little too much for him or something like that. Even though the man had a bunch of people following him and enjoying what he did, if you have any bit of fame on the internet, you're going to get some trolls and some level of harassment. There are people who just thought Nick was a weird freak who deserved to be castrated or something, when really, the man isn't harming a fly. He keeps to himself and just does what he likes. Checking up on him, he's made a life for himself. He's moved from place to place, doing different odd jobs, still dealing with the same struggles like his picky food choices or phobias. He's taken vacations and swam with the stuff he used to be afraid of. He seems to be living just a normal life. As normal as someone like Nick can have, anyway.
Blue water kills you. Or at least that's what it would have said 21 years ago. I wouldn't have even touched a rain puddle of all things. And yet, here I am, sunk in up to my neck in it. And it's about as blue as it can ever get.
You'll probably be sad to hear that Platform Masters is still not available to the public, despite working on it for well over a decade. He is currently working on other projects, though. He has a Patreon up where he gives updates on some of his games. He's making almost $800 in Patreon money every month just by doing this. That's a pretty chunk of change, so yeah, he still has a very dedicated following. He still updates about his games and his personal life to this very day. Very recently, he had his name legally changed to Ryan, because he just likes the name Ryan. So technically, I've been using an outdated name this entire time, but hey, listen. I already wrote most of the script before I found this out, and I didn't want to bother pronouncing Ulillillia this entire time. Leave me alone! So why did I make this video so much different compared to the other ones? Well, there are a lot of absolutely screwed up people who found their way to the internet, and it is fun to see them flop and flail around like a trout on land, but sometimes you get success stories, like Nick, and you gotta show them. This is a man who is self-admittedly severely mentally ill, but not only did he use the strengths he had, he also overcame many of his fears. I mean, the man used to be scared of grass for Christ's sake, but now here he is, making his own games, making hunters on Patreon, and still trying to navigate through life. I've seen a lot of people call Nick the Good Christian. They were both guys who were very mentally ill, didn't have good social skills, and didn't seem like they were going to go far. One went on a path of self-destruction, and the other actually did impressive things and lives a semi-normal life. But calling him the Good Christian, I think, is underselling him. The story of Ulillillia is one that shows you, no matter how often your own disorders or insecurities get in the way, you can use what you have in any way you want and make a name for yourself. It's not over for you, you'll just have to persevere in your own way. Ulillillia, Nick, or Ryan, whatever you want to call him, was one of the first internet oddities. At surface level, he may seem like a gigantic weirdo, but when you dig in deeper, you see a man who was dealt a bad hand, but used what he had to get through life. And if that isn't a compelling and motivating story, I don't know what is. Please go support him and his endeavors. I feel he deserves it. God bless, like and subscribe, and good night. And remember, boys and girls, Ulillillia was the world's biggest Bubsy fan, so no one else would have to be. That's among his greatest accomplishments. Godspeed.
So, there you have it. Max score. That's how easy it is.
Kitty, kitty. Kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, 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 kitty.
He was just a computer-generated bobcat, but Granny loved him.